Hey everybody, in this video we're going to talk about the top 5 reasons that you might want to consider for not living in Indianapolis, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis or any of the surrounding metro, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also tap that little bell so you're notified every time I do a new video each and every week. Now, we get reach outs from people all over the country with questions about Indianapolis, what it's like to live here, and of course all of the suburbs that surround Indianapolis as well. If you have questions at all about any of those things, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with your questions, and we'll certainly have your back whenever it's time for you to make your move to Indianapolis. So like I said in this video, we're going to get into the top 5 reasons that you might not want to live in Indianapolis. And these are some things that you can maybe research, but also you might have to live here just a little bit in order to really figure these things out. And if you're making your move to Indianapolis, I'm sure you're doing your research, and there are a lot of great reasons to live here. There's no question about that. But there's always going to be some things about a city that you want to know ahead of time before you get there. And so we're going to go through just 5 things that you might want to keep in mind before you move to Indianapolis. So number 1, and this is something that if you're researching Indianapolis across the country, you may run across, and the safety of Indianapolis. Indianapolis, it doesn't have the best safety reputation really across the country, but honestly, if you're looking at a lot of big cities, the safety reputation probably isn't stellar. You need to probably get into some smaller cities or smaller towns, and Indianapolis is a big city. So Indianapolis proper itself, there's a little under 1 million people there, but when you start including all the surrounding suburbs and towns and cities right near it, then you're talking 2 million people. So of course, when you get to that point, you're gonna have some bad spots. So the safety reputation for Indianapolis as a whole, across the country, not so great, but the safety in most parts of Indianapolis, and especially when you get into the suburbs, it's actually quite high. And some of the really popular neighborhoods and places to go inside of the city itself, like downtown Indianapolis, for example, they're really quite safe. There are absolutely some places in Indianapolis that you really want to avoid, but you're going to know to avoid those places already. And a lot of that violent crime, especially that you find in bigger cities and Indianapolis too, it's typically pocketed in some of those areas. So lots of safe places in Indianapolis, lots of safe places in downtown Indianapolis, and then of course when you get onto the outside and the surrounding suburbs, the cities and towns that make all of those up. So it's something though, of course, that you want to keep in mind anywhere you're moving to. How safe is it? And if you're getting really specific, like a specific neighborhood in Indianapolis or a specific suburb around it, and you have questions about that, then of course you can research that particular area. You can always reach out to us as well. We can help you out with figuring out whether it's maybe a right fit or not. Because honestly, there are some places that, especially when you get into the up and coming places, that it may be fairly safe right there in that particular neighborhood, but it's not too far away from a place that has a reputation for being fairly dangerous. And if you look up statistically, it can show that it is a fairly dangerous place. So doing your research, Indianapolis as a whole, I wouldn't take that absolutely across the board for the entire city as it being completely unsafe. It absolutely has plenty of safe areas. And number 2, if you're coming from a big city like Los Angeles or Chicago or New York or a super happening city like Miami, and you come to Indianapolis, Indianapolis is not one of those cities. And people in Indianapolis definitely don't try to compare Indy with a place like Chicago, which is of course the nearest really huge city in the United States, not that far down the road from here. So if you're looking for something like that, a pace like a super big city, it's probably going to disappoint you. Indy has plenty going on. We have plenty of sports. We have a happening downtown. We have actually fairly happening suburbs as well in their own right, for sure. Plenty of festivals, plenty of things to do for you as a young professional, as a single, for families, I mean, you name it. Indy has something to offer for everybody, but it is not going to be Chicago. It is not going to be New York. You will likely be disappointed if you think that that's going to be that way whenever you move here. And it's always going to feel a little slower than those places in the city itself, and then when you get into the suburbs, even though they are happening, it's still going to be even slower on average than what it is in the city, at least for the most part. So if that is your biggest criticism of moving to Indianapolis, then Indianapolis just might not be right for you. But do find that a lot of people moving from those big cities to Indianapolis, they are aware of that and they're actually embracing that. They want things to slow down a little bit. They want it to be less crowded. They want less traffic. They want some of the headaches that they may have had in some of those big cities to go away. But if you still want that stuff, Indy might not be the right fit for you. And number 3, this is definitely a big one with Indianapolis, is affordability. Now, across the country, I'm well aware that Indianapolis is a very affordable place. Very affordable. So if you compare to some of those places I just mentioned, like in Chicago or Los Angeles, Miami, New York, some of those really super happening cities across the country, $500,000, let's say $500,000, probably isn't going to go very far in any one of those places. But here it can go a really, really long way. And that is, for the most part, anywhere. You can get into the most expensive suburbs here, and $500,000, that's really going to get you a very, very nice place. And you get into the city in Indianapolis, it's going to get you a really nice place too. So there is the affordability when you compare Indianapolis to other places across the country, but it seems to have had this reputation, or it seems to have earned this reputation Indianapolis has, that it's extremely affordable. Like, there are steals everywhere. It is not as affordable as you think it is. So for example, if you have less than $200,000 to spend and you're coming to Indianapolis and think that there's just going to be deals everywhere, it's just not the case. You can definitely find homes under $200,000. You can find homes for $150,000 or even under $100,000. You certainly can. But a lot of those homes are not going to be in places that you want to be. And it's going to limit your choice, at least as to which location that you could move into, because there's just isn't going to be any homes that are at that particular price. So every neighborhood, big neighborhood in Indianapolis, and for the most part, every suburb kind of has their break-in point. And to find one that's under $200,000 is pretty difficult to do, really difficult, but still possible. It's just that you have to be open to maybe being in a place that you didn't necessarily want to be in. So Indianapolis, while I get it, it's quite affordable when you compare it to the rest of the country, but just need to make sure that it's not the steal that a lot of people have made Indianapolis out to be. And number 4, this is something that, boy, when you live here for a while, it's going to affect you. And it's the fact that, hey, we have winter here, and we have real winter. So it's a real Midwest winter. Now, we don't get a lot of snow like a lot of other places in the Midwest yet. Up in Chicago, northern Indiana, Michigan, I mean, those places definitely get some snow. They get many, many, many inches a year. We only get about 22 inches a year during the entire winter. And that's good and bad. I mean, when you get in the winter, it's kind of long. Once we get in December, winter is really kind of set in at that point. We go through January and February, and even March can be a little bit rough. It's beginning to warm up at that point, but it's still quite cool. It's wet for the most part, and just kind of like it is for the rest of the winter. And if we had more snow, you might have a little bit more to do. So if you are, let's say, as an example, a hardcore snowboarder or a skier, or you really love to do those things, you come to Indianapolis and expect to find some places, well, there are some places that you can go and ski and tube and sled, things like that. But if you're really a hardcore skier or a snowboarder, that's not skiing. That's not snowboarding for you. Definitely not. You're going to be wildly disappointed. I mean, they're basically hills with man-made snow, manufactured snow, so it's just not the same. The runs are extremely short, very, very short. So it's nothing like Colorado or Utah or Washington, or if you get into any place in the Rockies out west. So you'll be disappointed with that. And you just don't have that much snow on the ground, period, here. So even your sledding opportunities are pretty limited. Your building a snowman opportunity is fairly limited as well. So most of the winter, it's cloudy, it's cold for the most part, and you're going to be limited as to what you can do outside, unless you just, of course, like the cold, and you're going to love it. But people that live here in the Midwest, we're okay with the 4 seasons, and we enjoy the 4 seasons. We like getting a break from the hot summer and kind of have that cold winter to change gears a little bit. It does feel like things slow down some. It's darker more in the evening, and that just has a different vibe and a different feel, for sure. And then when you get into the spring and the summer, you really appreciate the leaves on the trees and the really nice weather that comes along with that. So you have to be in it here for the long haul in the winter. And sometimes it can get long once we get into February and March, and you're kind of ready for it to be done. But it's here, and it's something that you'll have to, of course, deal with whenever you move to Indianapolis. And number 5, Indianapolis has a big car culture, or a truck culture for that matter. So you see cars and trucks all over the place in Indianapolis. So if you're moving from a big city like Chicago or New York, or even portions of Los Angeles, or say Seattle, something like that, or San Francisco, our public transportation here in Indianapolis is just not that good. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We haven't had tremendous public support for it. Plus, there's the fact that Indianapolis is actually just really spread out. And so public transportation is just difficult when geographically you've got a city that covers a really big area. So there are plenty of places in Indianapolis, and actually even some of the suburbs, that are quite walkable. You could even live in those areas and walk to a grocery store or a restaurant, or just about, gosh, a lot of things that you could actually do. But if you don't live in that area, then you're probably going to park your car and then walk to all of those things, and then go back and get in your car and drive home. So we've got a city bus system. We've also got something called the Red Line, which goes north and south and connects a lot of neighborhoods to the downtown area of Indianapolis, and helps people moving from those neighborhoods into downtown that may work there. But it doesn't cover the entire city. Other than that, we've essentially just have taxis and Uber. And of course, you can't just walk out on any street in Indianapolis and hail a taxi. And of course, everybody knows how Uber works. You have to put it in the app and request a ride. And sometimes, depending on where you are, you don't have a ride that's 5 or 6 minutes away. Sometimes it might be 20 minutes away, sometimes more than that. I've definitely been in places where there aren't any available. So on the Uber app, you can just look and it'll tell you, no, there isn't an opportunity for a ride here. So you have to figure something out. So essentially what that falls back onto is your car. So if you're used to owning a car, well, Indianapolis, you're probably not going to feel any difference. But if you're living in a place where you've never owned a car, or you haven't owned or leased a car in a very long time, you'll probably have to do that here. You could get away with it, like I said, maybe in a few neighborhoods, but it'll be difficult. And of course, it depends on your work situation too, and your preferences. But Indianapolis, just like a lot of other cities across the country, we do have car culture here, and we're pretty dependent on those. So there you have it. There are 5 things about Indianapolis that, you really might not like, and you certainly want to consider before moving here. So if you have any questions at all about any of those things or anything else related to Indianapolis, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.